Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our community. What did they do to get started and what are they doing to stay there? We are in season 3. Oh my goodness, I have another special guest today. I'm getting to talk to Ernest Martinez. Ernest is certified with his SPHR, his SHRM-SCP. He is a human resources executive. He also serves on the Dallas HR Board of Trustees. I've known Ernest for a long time. Man, I'm so excited to have you on the show. How you doing, Ernest?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, Bruce. Honored to be here. I appreciate the invitation, seriously.
Well, I'm honored to have you on, and I always like to reflect back. The first part of my show, I always like to talk, like, when did I first meet Ernest? And it's been through Dallas HR. We're going to get into serving college students, volunteer leadership, but that's really when our paths crossed. And it had to be about 10 years ago. But, you know, recently we both saw each other for the first time in a while at the Dallas HR Stars Gala. What'd you think about that, Ernest?
That is just such an amazing annual function for us. So great to see so many professionals together, being recognized. I mean, we've got some amazing people out there doing amazing work. And so for me, just to also, you know, in COVID world, just being able to connect with people again, you know, hugging people, talking to them about, you know, how long it's been since we've seen each other has just been really amazing. And so we had a great time at the gala. Great to see some folks that we hadn't seen for quite some time, and then also great to meet new people.
It was incredible. It was a sold out event. This was our 3rd annual gala. And just for those of you listening, the HR Stars Gala is really a recognition awards night for the HR community in Dallas HR. And that really started, I mean, years ago, we would recognize professionals during our lunch, right? An executive of the year, or maybe a volunteer leader of the year. But Dustin Pascal, who serves on the board of trustees, came up with a brilliant idea and then collaborated with the team. And now look at you, here you are, 3rd year and having this incredible event. Amazing, right?
Agreed. And everyone enjoyed it. I mean, I usually get so much feedback from people after the event. And then also just, you know, connecting with new people, making those connections, going back to LinkedIn, and then having a second, third, fourth conversation with new people and the networking opportunity. So it's an amazing event. I loved it.
I love to use the word energizing, and I think we were all energized that night. Hey, let's get this show started. I would love to hear, you know, I've known you for a long time. But I bet you there's some things I don't know about you, and I would love for our listeners to know the Ernest Martinez story. Like, where did you grow up, and how in the world did you get into HR and leadership?
My wife and I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, born and raised. You know, I started in what I consider customer service, which to me is just the beginnings of HR, right? Started with HEB food stores, worked for Sears Roebuck and Company, right? Satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. Was an outside sales rep for them. I sold home improvements, roofing, fencing, gutters. Back in 1989, we transitioned over to Dallas. We moved to Dallas, moved to Louisville because the office was supposed to be right here in Vista Ridge Mall. The minute we got settled, they said, oh, by the way, the office is not going to be at Vista Ridge Mall. It's going to be down here over here on Ross Avenue in downtown Dallas. So not terribly exciting. Anyone who's ever driven in Dallas traffic knows that's not good. But you know, I did that for several years with Sears, really enjoyed it, really enjoyed my time with them. Transitioned over to Sam's Club. I started with them as a part-time cashier, just temporary for Christmas. Sears was struggling, sales were struggling, and I took on this part-time job and stayed after Christmas. They asked me to stay, was a cashier for them, moved through levels of supervisors, and eventually 10 years after I began with Sam's, I was a general manager for the Sam's Club over on Northwest Highway. And so most of my career has really been in retail management. I was a GM for Sam's Club. I later transitioned over to Best Buy. And, there's just so many aspects of retail that are all revolve around HR. You're constantly dealing with employee relations issues. You're mentoring young folks. You're developing new leaders to promote within the organization. And so at some point back in 2009 or so, I decided that I wanted to get out of the retail management space. And I went back to school at the University of North Texas, got my degree in 2011, and started as an HR executive in 2012, taking a massive pay cut, right? Because you're just like, even though I had 25 years in retail management, on paper, that doesn't really look like HR. And so I knew it was going to be a challenge. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take the plunge and see what happens. And that became the beginning of me making that transition over to HR. And so I've been doing that. I was with the MB2 Dental Solutions, was a dental group. I've worked for Securidyne Systems. I was with a nonprofit. And what I really like about HR also is that I can transition across industries. It doesn't really matter. Like, I don't have to stay in pigeonholed in one area. And it's been an exciting ride for sure.
Man, there is so much there. Now, first of all, go Mean Green. Both of my sons
Yes.
graduated from the University of North Texas. So that's pretty exciting. So when you said you graduated from UNT, which I knew that, you always proudly wear you wear your green proudly. Hey, I want to ask you this question because you said something. And by the way, for people who don't know, driving from Louisville to downtown Dallas, oh my goodness, that can be, man, that can be tough. Hey, I want to ask you this though, because this resonates with me, and I bet you some of the people listening, it will resonate with. Maybe they're thinking about doing this, but you said you took a pay cut. You went back to school, you got your degree, and then when you got out, you took a pay cut. And I want to ask you, like, what was that like during that time? Like, I mean, it's got to be tough. I mean, you're making pretty good money, and then you decided, hey, I'm going to change lanes. But in order to do that, I always call it, the John Maxwell always talks about the law of sacrifice, right? Sometimes you have to give up
Right.
to go up. And that happened to me whenever I took my position with Armstrong 18 years ago. I took a pay cut. And so I'm curious, like, what was that like? What was that feeling? And how long did it take you to get to where you needed to go?
It was risky because I have a family, right? So I had kids at home, a wife, a mortgage like everyone else, car payments. And so there's risk involved in it. I think a big aspect of it though is that, you have to have a belief that what you're doing is right. A belief that, that you're going to get in there and you're going to demonstrate your capacity. Retail management doesn't always look as challenging as it really is to an outsider, but decisions are made on the fly. It's 24/7. Every day brings a new adventure. And so in the world of HR, it's all that, right? Every day is different. Like, people ask me sometimes, well, what do you do, throughout an 8-hour day? And there's just not an easy answer to that because every day brings something different. But I did have a very strong belief, and I was very passionate about doing things to be able to help employees. I was on the other side of it. And so somebody from up in Minnesota, let's say from Best Buy, would send out, hey, here's benefits open enrollment, and here's the guidelines, and make sure you get these out to everybody. And so they would just kind of, guide you and say, these are the deadlines. And so I went from having somebody sending that to me to now I'm making all those decisions. And so it was a really interesting transition, but the value in it was really too also that I had a different perspective, right? I had a perspective of being an operations individual. And so when we start planning things like that, you have in the back of your mind, well, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like it's going to be easy for employees to do. we need to rethink this, right? How do we make this easier? Whatever that open enrollment is, or whatever it is we're rolling out, how do we make it easier for employees? And now I was also making selections on their benefits, right?
Mhm.
You know, hey, let's roll out a paid parental leave program. Let's go with infants at work, where you can bring your baby to work with you in the office for the first 6 months. Um, you know, so that way a new mom comes back to work, but doesn't feel like she's having to leave her newborn with somebody. So it definitely was interesting. It was a challenge initially to really learn some of the acronyms that I really didn't have exposure to on the other side.
Mhm.
But you know, looking back on it, it was just an amazing adventure.
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. I love that. You know, whenever you talk about belief, I always think back about, you know, many times belief is developed by, you know, the people who are around. And one of the
Mhm.
things I do like to ask on the show is, you know, I mean, you started out like you went back to school and kind of started over. And one of the questions I like to ask, I mean, here you are now, you're an executive. Like, were there some like mentors that helped you along the way? And if there were, what were some things that made them such great mentors?
You know, the value that I had for most of my career was really with that retail management, and so many great general managers and district managers to work with, VPs. But you know, I really go back to Sam Walton, Made in America, with coaching by walking around, understanding the importance of building relationships with people, and developing those relationships to the degree that you're comfortable, right? I'm comfortable going to Daryl McClure or Corbett Jennings or Jeff Thompson, who, you know, who mentored me throughout that career, and being able to really just, you know, kind of ask stupid questions sometimes, because, you know, you have to be in a safe environment to be able to do that.
Mm.
And they created that for me. You know, moving into HR leadership on this side of it, you know, I had, you know, one of my very first leaders, Ann Villanueva de Vera, was very challenging, right? She was always very respectful, always very professional, but very challenging. And even to this day, when I connect with her, she'll ask me things like, "Well, are you know, have you written that book yet? You know, and what you know, what are you waiting for?" Right? And so I think I have had a variety of mentors, but I will tell you this. Um, there's no greater mentor than finding the right person to spend your world with, right?
Mhm.
And my wife Monica has I mean, you know, we all have those times when we just have that self-doubt. You're not sure, right? Was this the right decision? You know, am I, you know, I'm struggling, you know, it's them, it's not me. But you need to have the right person that's committed to telling you when it's you and not them, who's uplifting, who's visionary, who says, "Hey, you know what? You need to do this, and you're not going to like it, but that is what I'm recommending you do." Right? As an outsider looking in, sometimes they see things that where we're standing in our own way, right? We're just and so so she gives me a very fresh perspective. We've been married over 30 years, and it's just it's beneficial to have somebody in your corner during those periods where you just really question either your ability to get something done, when it's just a challenge to get to the end. And so, you know, if I had to single out a mentor, it would be my wife, Monica. Hands down, easy answer. Doesn't mean I don't have others, but in the really challenging times, I know I can count on Monica.
Hey, shout out to Monica, man. That is fantastic. I love that because we talk about a lot of people in our careers, but yet behind the scenes in our home, right? We have incredible mentors as
Yeah.
well. Hey, if you're listening to the show right now, you need to be writing this down. I mean, we're talking about sacrifice. We're talking about self-doubt. We're talking about belief. I mean, this is so much more. I want to ask you though, as we talk about this before we get into talking leadership, I want to ask you, one of the things you mentioned earlier too is about surrounding yourself with the right people, and you mentioned Monica, and immediately I started thinking about my book Find Your Lane when I talked about lifters in your life. Right? It's so like that's everything. It can make or break you, who you're surrounded by. I want to ask you this though. You've been doing this a long time. And I just want to know, like, was there a moment, like you said, yeah, I went from retail, then I went to HR, and you've been able to move across. But was there a moment when you said, I found my lane? I love what I do.
You know, that's an interesting question. One of the reasons I spent so much time in retail was service. I have a passion, and I love being able to find solutions, take care of people. And so I don't know if there was a single moment,
Mm-hmm.
but I do know that there were times where I recognized that whether it was as a Cub Scout leader or a band parent, right, which requires countless hours of sacrifice and volunteering, or assisting with my daughter's teams, right? My daughter was like in volleyball and soccer, and we traveled, and really understanding that titles really don't matter. I really quickly realized that I enjoyed service. I enjoyed being part of something and contributing in some way. And so I don't know that there was a single instant where I said to myself, oh, yeah, you know what, this is my lane. I just think it was an evolution. It was an evolution of me being able to transform and say, you know what, this is part of my DNA. It's not, it's, that I see quotes from time to time that say, find something, find a job that you're passionate about. You'll never work a day in your life. And I don't remember who said it, right? But there is some value to that. There's value to really understanding that if you enjoy what you're doing, and it really isn't work. It's just you're doing what you love to do. And so I don't know that there was a single moment. I do know that at some point or another, I realized, and that really partially comes back to that transition from retail management to HR, where I thought I can make a bigger contribution, right? But how? And so I just thought, you know what, I can do this. Let me just make this transition and let me see how it goes. And I feel very good about it. I mean, I never regret, never think back to myself and say to myself, gee, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just stayed and retired, after 40 years or whatever it is, right? There was not a single moment. It was all of a compilation of events, I think, throughout my life.
Well, I can tell you that what you're talking about, find the work you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I tell people all the time, that is not a myth. That is fact. As a matter of fact, just ask my wife. She'll tell you right now, Bruce doesn't work. Are you kidding me? But it really doesn't feel like work to me. And I've probably worked more hours today than I've ever worked in my entire career. But I will tell you that, when you talk about, purpose, Camille Tate, she's the head of talent for Strava, and she came onto the show and she talked about how purpose can be fluid, right? During different seasons,
Right.
you have different purpose. And so I love that. And I'm glad you shared that, because I want the listeners to hear that too, because, a lot of people, they're like, I'm not sure what my purpose is. And so, and you said, hey, look, for me, it was an evolution for me too. I mean, I was 37 years old before I realized, wow, okay, this is what my purpose is, And so I just love that. Hey, let's talk leadership 2022. I mean, last couple of years have been really different. I'd like to ask my guests on the show though, Ernest, if someone said, hey, what is leadership? How would you respond to that?
Service, support, empowering. When I think about that question, for me, leadership is servant leadership. And I know that's kind of cliche, right? People use that term and they throw it around quite a bit. But I do think it's true, right? I think building relationships with people, providing them with a safe environment, supporting them when they need support, in the way they need it. Not just, I mean, just because I think this is what you need, that doesn't mean I'm right. But partnering with people versus, I guess, telling people what to do and how to do it, but partnering with them in a collaborative type environment. And, even as I mentor, I ask a lot of questions. I don't have all the right answers, and I don't think any good, solid leader should have all the right answers. I think we have to be humble. We have to be able to say to ourselves, hey, you know what? I'm not right on that. You're right. I'm not. And I think it's just creating an environment where people really want to be partnered with you versus people feeling like they need that paycheck. I've always been a believer that when people come to work because they want to work with you or with a specific leader, they're going to do a better job. You've committed. You've demonstrated to them that this is the place to be, and it's no longer just about a paycheck. It's about accomplishment and purpose and the mission. So for me, leadership is all of those things, but really in a servant leadership environment. And I don't use that term lightly. I am a believer. I've always believed in servant leadership, and it takes work because while you're creating that relationship with people, you're also having to maintain that boundary. You can't get too friendly with people. You have to be able to see that line, that invisible line that says, hey, you know what, I want you and I to have a great relationship. I want to know, about you and your family and maybe what you did this weekend to a point, to a degree, and then, and then build upon that. And I think when you do that with employees, I think, and you build that right environment and the right culture with them, I think employees want to come to work with you. I think employees respect that. And I think they appreciate it as well.
I appreciate everything you said there. I do believe that people, they just want to feel valued, right? And if you're able to help create that they're going to want to come work for you. They're going to say, you know what? He hears me. He listens to me. He cares for me. He values what I'm doing. You said something though that I haven't talked about on the show. And I want to just dive into this just for a second. And you said boundaries, right? And we all know how important boundaries are. But I talk a lot about, work-life balance, work-life integration, former, Tony Sue, who was passed on, the CEO, former CEO of Zappos, always talked, and it just resonated with me. He said, hey, it's not about work-life balance, work-life integration. However, there still needs to be some type of boundaries. How does a leader establish boundaries, and how do they know? I'm sitting here thinking, in the world of social media and email and texting and all of these different connections, how do you know when how to line that boundary?
I think it's like anything else. I think one of the challenges for many leaders is they hesitate to say things out loud, to say it directly, right? And I think it is important for you to acknowledge that with employees when you begin the relationship with them. Hey, just want to make sure, I won't be friends on Facebook and social media and Instagram, right? I won't, I think that we should always have a professional relationship. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that to people. And I think what you do is you set a foundation of expectation for people. If you don't do that, then you leave it kind of open-ended and people get their feelings hurt. When you're not going to Susie's baby shower, it's okay to say, hey, I really appreciate the invitation, but I'm really not comfortable with that, right? It doesn't send a great message to the rest of the team if I'm heading over to your house for a baby shower. If you do something here in the office and we all do it together, there's probably value in that. But But I do think that there's a lot to be said for, laying those boundaries out and saying it out loud. Um, we often just kind of make assumptions that, oh, well, they know. But if somebody crosses a line telling me a story about their weekend, I may say, whoa, 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 let's, you can stop, right? It's good. Because I think you just need to kind of remind them, and not in a negative way though. I don't think, I think sometimes what also happens is people get hung up on titles.
Yeah.
I'm this and you're that, and that's not the way to set those boundaries. I want people to feel like we're on equal footing. Do we
Mm.
have different roles? Yes. Yeah, we do. And we have different roles, different responsibilities. Um, but we're equal and we're going to collaborate. And I'm going to ask your opinion on things. And sometimes we may go with that opinion, sometimes we may not. But I think when you treat people like that and you establish those boundaries and you say it out loud, I think there's value in that. And I think people respect that. And I think they have more respect for the boundaries when they know what they are
Mm.
versus just leaving them out there and hoping that they figure it out.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. I had not really talked to anyone about that, and I guarantee there's some people listening that appreciate what you had to share because maybe they feel like they're not sure, or maybe they have a particular view, and that either validates it, or maybe they want to change lanes there. Hey, I want to ask you, last couple of years, I mean, it's been tough, but there's also been there's been some silver linings. I mean, here we are on Zoom, right? I was just curious if you've had have you experienced any silver linings from the last couple of years? And if so, maybe share what one of those were.
Yeah, I think as employers, we had to pivot, adjust, and trust, right? We really had to look at things and say to ourselves, how do we, maintain the business, get that business continuity that we need, continue to achieve results, but do it in a remote workforce, right? During the last 2 years worth of this pandemic. And I think one thing that, for me, I think one thing that I've learned is that we have to be able to build trust with employees and identify what balance works well for them, right? As we're now starting the return to work, you start seeing the great resignation. You start hearing people, hey, I'm leaving, I'm going somewhere else. And part of that is a result of people changing priorities, right? My priority, I don't know that I want to spend an hour and a half commuting to work every morning anymore, and an hour and a half commuting back, and lose 3 hours of my personal world. So it did, the last 2 years really did teach us as employers, for me, that we have to trust employees to do the right thing in a remote workplace. I come from a school where, in my generation, where you're in the office every day, and I don't want to say that somebody's peering over your shoulder, but that was kind of like, okay, you're working,
Yeah.
you're here in the office. And I
Yeah.
think we've had to transition. We've all had to pivot. We've all had to say, you know what, we need to reevaluate. We need to think about what's in the best interest of our employees. What's important to them? Can that work continue to be done remotely? And in a lot of cases, I think it can. And I think we need to really start to restructure positions and roles, and think about, is hybrid a forever thing?
Yeah.
Is remote for some of these positions a forever thing? Uh, 5 years ago, you probably had 80% of employers, 90% of employers that said, there's no way you're working remote. I
Right.
mean, it's just not going to happen, right? You could ask as many times, you can give me as many reasons as you want. But I think today, I think we're going to have to make different decisions. And I think employees are making different decisions. So what I have learned is that we're going to have to be different. We're going to have to think in a very innovative way. How do we take care of our employees and still take care of the business and drive results?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's a great segue because I was thinking about, yeah, I mean, we are in a new world of work, right? And there's still many companies that don't have their workforce back to the office yet, and they're going to start bringing them back. But I'm hearing a lot of remote work. I'm hearing hybrid. I'm hearing flex. But the one thing I keep hearing is this here to stay? Right? Is this here now or is this here to stay? But the question I have for you, because I've talked to you before about the importance of culture, like how can you? I guess the question is, can you build culture, a strong culture? With this new flex work, remote work. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, in a regular workplace, when everybody's in the building, it's tough to maintain a strong culture within an organization. So let me begin by saying that that's already a challenge. I think you have some companies that do very well with that, and you have other companies that don't. Uh, but now transitioning over to a remote workforce, I think you have to be as intentional or really more intentional than you are when they're in the office, right? You have to set up that weekly meeting and ask for people to have their camera on. You need to think about innovative ways to have team events, right? Some people that I think were able to start really kind of taking that to a different level are some of the vendors that reached out and they said, hey, we're going to have a mixology class.
Mm.
And we're going to bring everybody in, right? And we're going to have fun, and don't worry about it. You're going to have these little packages. We're going to tell you how to mix them all up. And I don't, and the goal there was for them to continue developing business, continue developing relationships with potential clients, right? And I think we can do that with employees. I think we can celebrate Pie Day by figuring out a way to get a pie delivered to every employee's home, right? And say, hey, let's jump on a call, let's eat pie together, right? I think there's ways for you to do it, but it's going to have to be a transition into how do we do that? How do we accomplish this? How do we, do we bring them in to the office for some type of monthly function or bi-monthly function, right? So everybody gets names with faces. I think the people that were pre-pandemic working together I think they need it. I don't think they need it as much as, let's say, the new hire that started 6 months ago, who's never been in an office with everybody, who's never had those impromptu conversations, grabbing a cup of coffee with somebody. I think it's easy for them to feel disconnected. And I think if we're intentional about it, if we think about it, we say, hey, let's plan this, and this over next month. And let's find ways to engage employees. What's interesting is that I've been on many virtual calls where there's no camera. You have 2 or 3, a handful of people. And that to me is really, there's no way to be engaged. You're going to find other stuff to do. I have 3 screens in my office. I'm going to find something to look at. So I think you have to be intentional and say, look, I just need you for 30 minutes. I need you for an hour, but I need to see your face. I need to see your expressions, because that matters. And that body language tells people how you feel about them, whether that's virtual or in person. Doesn't matter, right? When you and I see each other, it's on, man. What's going on? How's your world? What are you up to? Right.
Yeah.
But we can do that even on this call, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a relationship, and so we have to find ways to do that. I think it has to start with even the onboarding process for people who are remote today, to be able to continue to build that and cultivate that culture you're looking for.
Yeah, I think everything you shared there was terrific. I do think the key word, you said it 2 or 3 times, is intentional. And I think that's the key from here on out is you have to work harder, right? You have to work harder for it. You have to be more intentional. You have to have those conversations, because I've seen it. I've seen where, hey, it's time for a Zoom call and people don't turn on their cameras anymore. And so it's like, and you said before, you talked about boundaries, right? Go ahead and draw that, set those expectations. And hey, 30 minutes, we're going to turn on our cameras. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. And so I love how you shared all of that. Hey, I want to ask you, man, you're a busy guy. But yet you mentioned earlier the importance of service.
Mhm.
You also serve in Dallas HR, the third largest SHRM chapter in the country. Currently, you serve on the board of trustees. You've served in many different roles. I know you've served in the college student relations in one area. Talk a little bit about the importance of serving outside the workplace. Number one, and then number two, what is what have you learned from serving at Dallas HR? Has it helped you, or have you been able to help that organization?
Yeah, I really first let me say that I enjoy serving, and I know I've said that throughout this call, but I really do enjoy spending time and giving back and paying it forward. I have that in, I think, even on my LinkedIn profile. I believe in paying it forward. Uh, it's about being intentional with time and
Mm.
recognizing that you have to make time for things that are important to you. And it is important to me. It's important to me. I wasn't actively engaged with Dallas HR as I should have been until I met Tom Barton.
Hmm.
And so Tom Barton and I met at HR Southwest conference, and we're sitting outside after one of the events. And we're around like one of those mixer receptions, and we get into this conversation. And he tells me he volunteers, and I said, yeah, that's nice, and that's great, and I'm glad for you, right? And then a few weeks later, Tom reached out to me and said, hey, you want to grab some lunch? And I thought, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, right? I love to network with people. And so I meet up with Tom. He's like, we're looking for someone to join as a volunteer for student engagement. And I was wondering, do you think you'd be interested in that? And so I thought, yeah, I could do that. Well, tell me about the meetings and how does this work? And I kind of describe it a little bit like the Boy Scouts. They bring you in and they say half an hour a month. And before you know it, you're like 8 hours, 16 hours in, and the thing is wheels off and you're volunteering for something else and this over there. But I really, really appreciated that, because when I started working with the student engagement committee, I really found myself connecting with a lot of other volunteers who were passionate about contributing, about giving back. And that committee in particular, what I really enjoyed also was that we were going to university campuses and we're talking to students at the SHRM chapter, and they're getting ready to graduate. And they're just dying for some
Mm.
guidance, right? They're ready to
Yeah.
just sponge up whatever you talk to them about. And so, I really enjoyed that. It's done. Volunteering for Dallas HR has done as much for me as I think it has for some of the students that we've been able to engage with, who are now professionals today. When I think a little bit about what volunteering outside the workplace has done for me, I mentor. I've been mentoring, unbeknownst to me, I didn't even have a word for it, right? But when in retail management, I had young leaders who would ask like for guidance, and I was it mentoring? Yeah, I just I didn't have a term for it, but I have some of those stories of, for example, one Best Buy employee I worked with. He came to me and said, hey, I had just left Best Buy, I'd been gone 6 months, but we worked together for about 2.5 years. He said, hey, they're wanting to promote me to a manager. And I'm like in my junior year at UNT for my mechanical engineering degree. What do you think? And so I just said, look, I'm going to give you my 2 cents, but you decide, right? It's your world. I'm going to tell you what I think about it. And so I recommended that he stay in school and get that degree. I said, retail management's hard. You're going to spend a lot of hours away from family. You're going to make a lot of sacrifice, but stay in school and get the degree. And then you can always go back, right? It's not like they're going to turn you out. And so he did, and he got his degree, and he went to work for Baker Hughes, an oil company. And he's really a smart young man, very bright. And they came to him and said, hey, we think we want to expatriate you to Germany to one of our facilities there. And so he came to me and he brings this big packet of stuff and he says, I don't know what to do here, right? Could you help me, right? Could you guide me? And so Monica and I sit down with him and we look through it and pack it and we're like, yeah, this looks like a good deal. And it's honestly, you could probably write your own ticket with Baker Hughes if you spend 2 years in Germany and come back, right? You're probably going to get your pick of whatever you want to do. And so he did. Pandemic hit. So all the traveling that he thought he was going to do, oh yeah, we're going to get to see you. You know, he had just gotten married. They had just had their firstborn, and all the traveling, it's gone. And they're in this little German apartment that's probably 1,000 square feet, and it's 2-story. So you're just like crunched in here, 3 people, and you can't go anywhere. Because in Germany, you had to have a permit and only one person could travel. Long story short, still mentoring him, mentoring him on how to be a good husband, a good father. His wife actually worked for me as well at Best Buy. So we have they're our surrogate children. When they were in Germany, we were on a 10 a.m. call every Sunday morning to talk about what's going on in your world. That's right. Awesome. What can we help you with? So there's a tremendous value in it. I believe volunteering both inside and outside the workplace, critical to, again, pay it forward.
That's fantastic. And I have seen that on your LinkedIn. I think it says you're a mentor, servant leader, connector, volunteer, builder of people, culture creator with a pay it forward spirit. Hey, let me and by the way, I've seen you in action with college students, and you're very, very good. As a matter of fact, I remember at the HR games in Waco, Paige and man, there's so many different people that have been involved. Paige Luckemeyer, she's been involved with the students, Maria Gabrioli. I mean, just the list goes on. And, you know, one of the, you talked about graduating from UNT. I had Chrissy Rogers on my show in season 2. Chrissy Rogers is currently an HR manager. And I remember when I first met her, she was with the student chapter at UNT when she came to a Dallas HR meeting.
Really?
And I remember meeting her. 10 years later, she's the HR Southwest Conference director, and she's just flourished. And so you have an incredible impact in the college student community. There's so many different like college students that I mean I've met over the years, and you know, I'm glad to see what Dallas HR does for college students. I know that you currently have a mentorship program that's been going on for quite some time. I've been part of that, and so I just applaud you and Dallas HR for what you do in that area.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And there's a lot of enjoyment to it. And there's a lot of people that are part of this, where a lot of us are connectors. And I know people reach out to me periodically and they say, hey, you know, I'm looking for the next opportunity, or I'm looking for this, or I'm looking for that. And we'll get on LinkedIn and I'll say, you need to reach out to these 10 people. You being one of those people, Bruce. I've sent many people to you saying, hey, reach out to Bruce, tell him I sent you to him. Mike Pierce, Callie Miller, Chrissy Rogers, you know, and I think there's value in being able to give them a support network for whatever it is they're looking for. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I know Chrissy, she's amazing. Big Mean Green fan too. Like we're season ticket holders, basketball. She's season ticket holder too. So yeah, definitely know Chrissy.
Hey, and a quick shout out to Tom Barton. I just want to say thank you, Tom Barton, for getting Ernest involved. That is a great story. Tom is a former president of Dallas HR, and he is the upcoming HR Southwest Conference director here in the next year or two, I believe. But what drives you in your everyday as a leader, Ernest?
It's kind of a tough question, but I would tell you faith, right? Faith and faith in people. You know, I want to be supportive and help. And I don't know sometimes even how to help, right? I have to ask a lot of questions, but I'm really driven by being able to spend a few minutes with people and feel like I can give them something. And I don't know what that something is. But I do know that I absolutely love people. That even goes all the way back to my customer service days in retail, where I had regular customers, right? As a cashier at HEB at the age of 18 years old, I had regular customers who would come and get in my line that had, 5 people in it, and they had no weight in the line right next to me, right? But it was, I really enjoy, I'm driven by building relationships with people and by having faith in the goodness of people.
Mm.
I think people are good. And I think we spend a lot of time seeing stories, in social media or wherever you see them, where, it doesn't always paint the best picture of people, but I really think people are good. And I think people want to be around people who believe that they're good.
Mm.
And so I'm driven. I'm really driven. I will connect with anyone that tries to connect with me. And if they say, well, I was given your name by blah, blah, blah. Can you help me with this? I'm going to find a way.
I love that.
Absolutely going to find a way.
I love that. I love that. Hey, last question before we shift over to it's time to accelerate. I always like to just ask this question. Have you ever been given any advice? I mean, you've given a lot of great advice on the show today, but have you ever been given any advice, maybe early in your career? Maybe it was from when you were, going to school, that you just find yourself sharing with others. It's just such good advice. Any advice that you find yourself sharing with others?
I wish I had some like some really cool words of wisdom, but I will tell you this: treating people the way that you want to be treated, never losing sight of being professional and respectful, always, always. It even in the most trying of times when the work is hard or the challenge is tough, I think you treat people right. I've had employees who, unfortunately, I was the person that had the conversation that said, hey, unfortunately, we can't keep you with the company.
Yeah.
And I think, running into somebody 10 years later, walking down the sidewalk, and them stopping and saying, hey, how are you? And do you remember me? And this really did happen to me one time. And they said, well, you remember me? I'm such and such. And you actually fired me from blah, 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 blah. And I was like, in that moment, you're thinking, what? But it wasn't a bad conversation. And I just based on the body language and the dialogue with the former employee, I realized that a big part of that was because I wasn't disrespectful to them. I wasn't ugly or unkind to them, even in that very difficult conversation. And I think sometimes we get mad and sometimes we make decisions that aren't the best decisions as leaders during those kind of conversations. But I think if you do it right and you're just open and honest with people, I think they get it. And we had a great conversation, 10 or 15 minutes, just talking. Well, what are you doing now? And where are you? And that to me is a result of just always ensuring that you treat people right and that you're professional and respectful to people always.
Hey, in a world where we could be anything, be kind. I love that.
Right.
Love that. Oh man,
Right.
I told you the time was going to fly. So we're going to shift over to it's time to accelerate. I'm going to ask you just a few questions as we wrap up the show. Ernest, I always like to ask, would you rather read a book or listen to a podcast?
Read a book, nothing against podcasts, but read a book because I like having a book in my hand. I like the smell of a new book. I like being able to go back and refer to the book when I want to. Not that I couldn't do that with a podcast, but I really do like books. And sometimes I'll even loan those books out. 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Find Your Lane, This Land of Strangers. So I have certain books that I even refer to people. Hey, if you want my copy, just make sure I get it back.
I love it when I heard find your lane.
By you know who.
That is fantastic. Listen, I'm honored whenever you share that. Hey, let me ask you this. Outside of work and all your volunteering that you do, I know you got a great mentor in that household with you. Hey, what energizes you outside of the workplace?
Okay, I'm going to give you the short answer, but it's a really long answer, right? So we do a lot of traveling, a lot of University of North Texas football, basketball, season tickets, like I said earlier. We do a lot of stuff with friends, and we have two core groups of friends. We have our Mean Green family that we do all of our UNT stuff with, and then we have our cruise crew, and that's there's about 8 of us, and we'll go on cruises together. And we vacation together. It's a great relationship because we get to really kind of be yourself, right? Everybody kind of has an understanding. You go on this cruise, but you're not anchored down to have to like do everything together. You have your time, doing what you want to do, but then you also have we agree that dinner every night together. Everything else is whatever you decide. Wake up when you wake up. Come out to the pool if you come out to the pool. Go with us to the comedy club if you choose to. But we are energized by just spending time with good friends, and really we're just always on the go.
That's so awesome. I love that. I mean, I got a big smile on my face as you're sitting here sharing that. I'm like, I can just feel the energy. Hey, last question. One of my favorite questions I like to ask Ernest, and here's the question. Ernest, 10 years older, is knocking at your door right now, and you're going to go answer that door. What's he going to tell you?
Probably what I'd hope he would say is, I'm proud of you for finding ways to give back to people. I think it's real easy to find reasons to not do something. I think time is one of them, right? There's just you're always struggling to fit everything into one day. But to me, it is important. And so it would be, thank you for finding ways. Keep growing and learning and keep challenging yourself to do more. Because I think the only limitations we really have are the limitations we put on ourselves.
That's a wise Ernest right there. I love that, man. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you. For just coming on, just sharing your wisdom, your perspective. Hey, for those who do want to connect with you, I know you mentioned you're on a social media platform, LinkedIn. How is the best way that they could connect with you?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is by far the easiest way to get connected with me. Even email is a challenge because of the fact that you get so many, right? Yeah. There's just so many emails. But if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I will connect with you. And if you message me, if you need something, happy to help, regardless of what that help is, right? Do you just need somebody to talk to do you want to develop a mentoring relationship? I'll give you an hour a month if you want it. Or if you're just looking for a new opportunity, I'm happy to help.
Man, I appreciate that so much. And for those who connect with Ernest, if you're going to go out and you're going to connect with Ernest on LinkedIn, just put it in the notes. Hey, I heard you on the podcast. I liked what you said about this. Share something. And it just makes the connection just that much deeper. And again, I appreciate you for coming on the show. I've enjoyed this time. Really appreciate you and what you're doing for Dallas HR, for the HR community. And for that, I say thank you. And most importantly, I say thank you for your friendship, Ernest.
Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Hey, I can't wait to share this. I'll talk to you later.
Take care.